My name is Margaret Ellison. My daughter-in-law is trying to convince everyone I've lost my mind. But trust me, my mind has never been sharper. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth. Now get in the mood to listen to this story because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. It started with little things. At first, I thought I was being overly sensitive. A forgotten appointment, a misplaced envelope, a missed phone call I swore I never heard ring. I chalked it up to age. 68 isn't ancient, but the world certainly acts like it is. Still, I've always been organized. As a school counselor for over 30 years, routine was my lifeline. I knew how to manage chaos, and I could spot manipulation from a mile away. But I never expected it would come from my own family, especially not from Claire. Claire, my son's wife, moved in with us after their condo flooded. It was meant to be temporary, a few months at most. I agreed readily. Of course they could stay here. Family is family. And I genuinely believed she was a kind woman at first, quiet, reserved, polite. A little too polished, perhaps, but I thought that was just her way. But lately she's been watching me. Not in a curious, worried way. No, it's the kind of stare that lingers a second too long, the kind that follows you when you leave the room. I'd catch her eyes narrowing as I buttered my toast. Her head tilting slightly when I forgot my reading glasses in the laundry room. She always had something gentle but insidious to say. "Oh, Maggie, did you mean to leave the oven on? Don't worry, it's okay, you probably just forgot you already brewed the coffee. Maybe you should start writing things down more just in case. You know, for your own peace of mind." Each time I smiled. Each time I felt something inside me bristle. It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. Always with that soft voice, that smile that didn't reach her eyes. And David, my son, would just nod like she was doing me a favor by keeping an eye on me. One evening, she walked into the kitchen while I was making dinner and stood behind me in silence for nearly 2 minutes. I turned, startled. "Oh, I didn't want to disturb you," she said, placing a hand on her chest like I'd frightened her. "I just wasn't sure if you'd noticed the water boiling over." The pot was still within safe limits, but I'd been humming, lost in thought. And the way she said it made me feel like I'd nearly burned the house down. Claire began offering to help me more and more. "Don't worry, I'll take care of that, you just rest. Let me do the shopping, no need for you to strain. You must be tired, you've done so much already." She made me sound like a frail old woman, a relic, a problem. The strangest moment came on a Thursday morning. I came downstairs to find the living room spotless but different. The bookshelf was rearranged. My favorite mug was in the dishwasher, though I hadn't used it. And the thermostat had been turned up to 76, which I never do. I looked at the photos on the mantel. One of them, an old picture of me and my late husband, was flipped backward, as if someone had dusted but forgotten to return it properly. Or, had it been flipped on purpose, I told myself I was being ridiculous. Claire was probably just being helpful. But that same day, I went to get my prescription medication from the hallway cabinet and 2 pills were missing. Not the whole bottle, just 2. Enough to notice, but not enough to accuse. I counted 3 times. My dosage was consistent. I never missed a day. I never took more than I needed. That evening, I asked David casually if Claire had been helping organize anything in the house. He raised his eyebrows and chuckled. "Organize, you mean like decluttering?" "No, just..." I noticed a few things moved around. Claire appeared in the hallway at that moment holding her phone. "I was just tidying up, Maggie." "Sorry if I moved something important," she said sweetly. "No harm done?" I replied, forcing a smile. "I just like to know where my things are." She nodded slowly. "Of course. It's easy to forget where things are sometimes. Happens to me all the time." But the way she said forget made my chest tighten. There it was again, that soft, dangerous tone. That night I wrote everything down in a notebook. every small detail. I even took a photo of my pill bottle with the date and time just to be sure I wasn't imagining things. Because that's the thing about gaslighting, you don't realize it's happening until you start questioning your own sanity. And then Claire started making tea every night. Chamomile. Always. Just for me. "It'll help you sleep better," she said one evening, handing me the mug with both hands like a gift. I sipped it cautiously. My trust was eroding fast. 2 nights later, I poured the tea down the sink when she wasn't looking and pretended I'd finished it. That night, I slept more clearly than I had in weeks. Something was wrong. My gut screamed it. But David didn't see it. He was working long hours and came home exhausted. To him, Claire was simply being helpful to his aging mother. I brought it up once, hesitantly, gently. "David," I began, "have you noticed Claire watching me more lately?" He frowned. "Watching you?" "Yes. I feel like she's hovering. And I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I get the sense she's testing me." He sighed, placing his phone on the table. "Mom, you've been through a lot. Dad's gone, you've retired, it's natural to feel unsettled. That's not what I mean. Claire's just trying to support you. She said you've been forgetting things lately." That last sentence struck me like ice. She said that she's just worried, that's all. We both are. Maybe it's time you saw someone. Just to talk. Maybe a therapist. Or we could go together. I stared at him. I wanted to scream. Instead, I nodded. "All right," I said softly. "Maybe I do need someone to talk to." And I meant it, but not in the way they thought. Because if Claire wanted to play games with my mind, she was about to learn that this mind isn't ready to break. Not yet. It's amazing how quickly a small seed of doubt can grow into a forest of questions. The morning after David suggested therapy, I awoke to a quiet house. Claire was already gone out for a yoga class, she said, but the silence felt too complete, like it had been prepared. I walked into the kitchen and immediately noticed the sugar jar was empty. That might not seem important, but I refill it regularly, and I had done so just 2 days ago. I opened the cabinet only to find the sugar container pushed to the back behind the cereal boxes. Full. Unopened. So why had the kitchen jar been emptied, and who moved it? I stood there staring at it, my pulse rising in a way I couldn't explain. It wasn't about the sugar. It was about the accumulation, the pattern. These were not isolated lapses. They were designed moments. Like someone carefully flipping through a deck of cards, stacking doubt upon doubt. That day, I began hiding small things, my keys, my planner, even my glasses. Not out of paranoia, but out of need. I had to know if I was losing things or if someone else was taking them. By that afternoon, my reading glasses had disappeared. I waited. I didn't ask. I simply sat in the living room and opened a large print book, squinting dramatically. Claire entered dressed in peach-colored yoga leggings, holding her phone. "Oh dear," she said, leaning over me. "Do you want me to help you look for them? Your glasses, I mean." I looked up at her slowly. "I didn't say they were missing." She blinked once, then smiled. "No, of course not. I figured since you're not wearing them and holding a book." Her voice trailed off, laced with sugar. The performance was too perfect. I nodded. "That's thoughtful of you. Actually, could you help me look in the kitchen drawer?" She seemed surprised, but went along. And while she rummaged in the drawer I'd already checked, I slipped away to the bedroom and retrieved my glasses from under my pillow, exactly where I had hidden them that morning. I returned to the kitchen and sat back down. Claire reappeared seconds later, empty-handed. "No luck." "Want me to check upstairs?" "No need," I said, putting the glasses on. "They were in my room all along." Her smile froze just for a fraction of a second. She recovered quickly, but I saw it. That flicker of frustration. Claire didn't like being outmaneuvered. That night, I started using a tiny spiral notebook. I called it my sanity ledger. Every item I moved, every word Claire said, every slip of the tongue. It was all written in neat cursive, dated, time stamped. The next day, I went to grab my notepad and found it wet. Damp. The pages slightly curled. The corners of 2 pages had blurred ink as if someone had spilled something and tried to dry it before I noticed. Claire had been in my room. That same evening, David came home early from work. "Mama," he said gently, "Claire told me you've been suspicious lately. Hiding things? Do you want to talk?" I forced a smile. "She told you that she's concerned. She said you accused her of moving your glasses. And sugar." I blinked. "I never accused her. I simply asked if she had moved something. She said you're writing things down obsessively. Keeping a journal about her. Is that true?" I didn't answer at first. I just stared at my son. His face had changed. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. And that was somehow worse. "David," I said slowly, "you know me. You know I've always been organized. Careful. That hasn't changed." "I do know you," he replied, "but you've been under stress. Ever since Dad passed, you've been alone a lot. Maybe it's affecting how you see things." There it was, the door creaking open to doubt. Claire had planted the seed and now it was beginning to root in my son's mind. I swallowed hard. "I don't think I'm the one seeing things." He frowned. "Then what are you saying I'm saying?" I whispered, "that someone in this house wants me to believe I'm unstable." He pulled back, his jaw tightening. "You don't really believe that, do you?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The silence was enough. That night, I found the wall clock in the hallway reset. It was 23 minutes fast. I hadn't touched it in years, and no one else had a reason to adjust it. Then I opened the refrigerator and noticed the milk carton had been rotated, label facing backward, just like the photo frame had been turned. Subtle things. Almost nothing. But too consistent to ignore. By the end of the week, my sanity ledger was 3 pages long. I had written down every deviation, every faint smile, every sudden mistake Claire claimed was my own. But the more I documented, the more I began to see the shape of her plan. She wasn't trying to hurt me physically. She wanted my credibility. She wanted David to see me as unreliable, fragile, confused. And once that image took root, once enough people believed I was losing it, I would no longer be a threat. But a threat to what? That was the question that haunted me. What did Claire stand to gain from making me look unstable? Control of the house. David's sympathy. Independence from a mother-in-law who saw through her. I didn't know. But I knew one thing: if I allowed this to continue unchecked, I would lose my grip on everything: my home, my son, and eventually, myself. And that I could not allow. So the next morning, I made a choice. If Claire wanted to make me look crazy, then I would let her believe she was succeeding. Because sometimes the best way to expose a manipulator is to pretend you don't see the strings until you cut them all at once. David used to call me every Sunday like clockwork. Before Claire. Even after he got married, we had our routines. He'd text on Wednesday afternoons to ask if I wanted anything from the farmer's market. We'd have tea together at least twice a month, just the two of us. I never tried to interfere in their marriage, never pried, never criticized. I tried to be the kind of mother-in-law I'd wished for when I was younger. But now, he barely looked at me the same. Something had shifted. It wasn't just Claire's influence. It was his willingness to believe that I could be falling apart, that I was fragile, that I needed help. And that realization hurt more than anything Claire could ever do. It was a slow erosion, the way he'd gently correct me in conversation. "Mom, you told me that already. Don't worry, I'll take care of it, you probably forgot. You sure you're remembering that right?" Each word chipped away at me. One evening, I offered to drive to the store while they prepped dinner. Claire immediately stepped in, her tone wrapped in sweetness. "Oh, Maggie, maybe let David go instead. Remember last week, You missed that turn near the freeway and had to call him. I didn't miss the turn, I replied calmly. There was construction and the sign was covered. David didn't say anything, just kept chopping onions as if the moment didn't matter. But it mattered to me. She had brought it up in front of him on purpose, a calculated moment. I saw it in her eyes. I'm perfectly capable of driving, I added. And I remember that day very clearly. Claire smiled as if she pitied me. Of course. Just better safe than sorry, right? I nodded, went upstairs, and shut the door behind me. That night, I opened an old drawer in my bedroom and pulled out the emergency cash I'd stashed away for years. I took a portion and placed it under the mattress in the guest room, the one Claire had started using for her meditation time. I knew it was risky, but I needed to know. The next morning, the cash was gone. I said nothing, but I wrote it down. I didn't accuse her. Not yet. Because a confrontation too early would give her the chance to twist the story, to look hurt, to cry, to say I was paranoid. I needed proof. I needed patience. Then came the day David suggested taking my car keys. We were sitting in the living room, the TV humming in the background, when he broached the subject. Mom, he said, not looking directly at me. Claire and I were talking, and we thought maybe it's time to limit your driving. I set my tea down slowly. Limit. Just until we're sure everything's okay. You've been a little forgetful lately. I stared at him. What have I forgotten? He hesitated. Well, the other day you left the porch light on all day. And Claire said you almost walked into traffic at the grocery store parking lot. I stood up. My chest was tight, my hands trembling, not from fear but fury. I didn't almost walk into traffic. I was loading the groceries. I looked both ways. And as for the light, I've left it on every morning for 20 years. That's routine, not senility. David looked down. Mom, we're not trying to upset you. We just want you to be safe. You mean you want to feel in control? Claire walked in just then, as if on cue, drying her hands with a dish towel. Maggie, no one's trying to take your independence. We just want to make sure you're okay. That's all. Her voice dripped with faux concern. I forced myself to nod. Of course. I appreciate your concern. That night, I placed the keys in a safe I hadn't used in years behind a locked compartment in the closet. Let them try to take them. I'd had enough things taken from me lately, my routines, my dignity, my son's trust. But what hurt most was David. I remembered when he broke his wrist as a child and wouldn't let anyone but me clean it. When he called me from college crying the first time his heart was broken. He used to believe me without question. Now he believed Claire. Her word weighed more than my lifetime of integrity. I wasn't just losing my son, I was losing who I was to him. That evening, as I sat alone on the porch, Claire came out and handed me a cup of tea. Lavender, she said. It'll calm your nerves. I stared at the cup, then at her. Claire, I asked quietly, do you think I'm mentally unstable? She blinked, then gave me that delicate, deliberate smile. I think grief does strange things to people, she said. And I think maybe you need more rest than you realize. And if I saw something off, something strange, would you believe me? Of course she lied. I sipped the tea slowly, watching her through the steam. She had a plan. That much was clear. And David couldn't see it because he was too close to her, too in love, too loyal, too blind. But I wasn't blind. Not anymore. So I sat in silence, drinking the tea she made, knowing it was a test. And maybe even a trick. And I smiled. Because if Claire wanted a war, she picked the wrong old woman to manipulate. End of part 3. Say continue with part 4 when you're ready. Ban Janoi. Continue ChatGPT Janoi part 4. The moment they took my car keys. I understood the game had changed. It was no longer subtle manipulation or passive control. It was now a matter of power, who had it and who didn't. Claire had planted the idea and David delivered it with that soft concern that made it all the more bitter. It happened on a rainy Thursday. I had just come in from walking around the block umbrella in hand, my boots muddy from the puddles. David met me at the door with a forced smile. "Mom," he said, "can we talk?" I didn't like the sound of his voice. It was the same one he used years ago when he broke the news that he was moving out after college. Gentle, rehearsed, practiced. Claire stood behind him, leaning on the kitchen counter. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. David cleared his throat. "We're going to hold on to your car keys for a while. Just until we figure out everything." I stopped unbuttoning my coat. "Figure out what exactly?" Claire stepped forward, her voice low and saccharine. "Maggie, you've been under a lot of stress. And, well, it's been noticed that sometimes you forget things. And driving is dangerous if you're distracted." I narrowed my eyes. Did something happen? Did I crash into a mailbox? Run a red light? David rubbed his hands together. "No, nothing like that. We're just being proactive." "Proactive?" I echoed, almost laughing. How thoughtful. I wanted to scream. Instead, I held my breath. "I haven't had a ticket in 20 years. I've driven through snowstorms to get you to school. I taught you how to merge onto the freeway when you were too scared to go above 40. David's eyes fell to the floor. "It's just temporary, Mom. Just a precaution." Claire opened a drawer and pulled out a manila envelope. And to help make things easier, she added, "We've found a rideshare service that can pick you up anytime. We even preloaded the app on your phone." There it was. Not only taking away my autonomy, but replacing it like I was a child who needed training wheels. I looked them both in the eyes and nodded. "All right." David blinked. "Wait, you're okay with this?" I didn't say that. I replied, I said, "All right." "There's a difference." I went upstairs and closed my door. My hands shook as I opened the closet and pulled out the lockbox. The keys were already gone. Claire had somehow taken them while I was out. She had anticipated my resistance and removed the option altogether. That night, I began memorizing their routines. Claire woke early, always before sunrise. She ran the dishwasher at night and repacked the refrigerator every Sunday. She spoke to David in whispers behind closed doors and always made sure to be the one delivering bad news, with David as her silent witness. The next morning, I pretended to forget breakfast. I walked into the kitchen, stared at the coffee pot, and poured orange juice into my teacup. Claire saw me do it. "Oh, Maggie," she said gently, "that's not tea." "I know," I replied, smiling sweetly. "Just trying something new." She narrowed her eyes, caught off guard by my calm. Later that day, I left the oven on purposefully, just long enough for her to notice. She walked in, gasped theatrically, and turned it off. She told David later I was sure of it. Let her. The more notes she took, the more confident she'd become. The more confident she became, the sloppier she'd get. That night, I slipped my old phone, one Claire didn't know about, into the potted fern in the living room. It had a voice recording app I'd used back when I ran support groups as a counselor. Still worked fine. I set it to record. The next morning, I retrieved it. Claire had come in late from yoga and made a phone call to someone, her sister, I think. "She's getting worse," Claire said. She poured orange juice into a teacup. "She's completely unaware." Then a pause. "Yes, I'm documenting everything. David thinks it's his idea, but he knows we need a medical opinion. If we wait much longer, she might—" The audio cut off. She must have moved away. I played it twice. The second time I cried. Not because I was surprised, but because I was right. This was more than just a power play. Claire was trying to build a case. A pattern. She was laying the groundwork for something legal, something permanent. A declaration of incompetency. And David. God, my sweet boy, he didn't even know he was being weaponized. That night, Claire knocked on my door. "I wanted to ask how you're feeling," she said, her tone angelic. "I feel fine." She stepped inside anyway, uninvited. David and I are worried. We think you should talk to someone. I talk to plenty of people. I mean a therapist. I stared at her. What are you hoping they'll say? She blinked. I'm hoping they'll help you. I smiled. Well, I'll go if you come with me. A shared session. Wouldn't that be fair? There was a flicker in her eyes. She hadn't expected that. I don't know if that's necessary. Sure it is. If you're so concerned, wouldn't it help to hear it all together? She paused, then nodded slowly. Of course. I'll make the appointment. I nodded. I'll look forward to it. When she left, I picked up the phone and played her voice again, telling her sister how I was completely unaware. I pressed save. And then I smiled. Because now the game wasn't just about survival, it was about exposure. It was a Sunday afternoon when I found the recorder. I had bent down to tie my slipper near the dining table, and as I pushed the chair back, I heard a slight knock, plastic hitting wood. I thought maybe I'd bumped a coaster. But when I looked beneath the table's center beam tucked neatly beneath a strip of tape, there it was. A slim, black audio recorder. At first I just stared at it. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I listened to the distant sound of Claire in the kitchen humming to herself, falsely cheerful like she always was when she thought she'd won something. Then I carefully peeled it off. It was still warm. Freshly placed probably sometime that morning. And it was still recording. She was recording me. In my own home. She wasn't just whispering poison to David anymore. She was documenting me. Trying to gather evidence that I was unraveling. Proof of instability. Paranoia. Memory loss. But what she didn't know was that I had already started recording her. I took the recorder upstairs, plugged it into my laptop, and downloaded the files. The most recent was from the past hour. I pressed play and heard myself singing quietly, cleaning under my breath. Then a drawer slid open. Silence. And then Claire's voice, soft, predatory. She's been mumbling again. Just walking around, talking to herself. I think it's worse today. The sound of her tapping something. She forgot I was even here. Just walked past me twice like I wasn't there. I think we're almost there. Almost where Claire. To the edge. The part where I break. The moment you call a doctor to declare me unfit. I sat with the recording in my hands, trembling, not from fear but resolve. I knew what I had to do. That evening during dinner, I watched Claire more closely than ever. She had that same robotic smile, spooning out lentils onto my plate like I was a guest in my own house. David scrolled on his phone, distracted. Every few minutes, Claire glanced at him as if waiting for him to say something. But he didn't. She wanted him to bring it up, another incident. The forgotten grocery item, the missing salt shaker, the email I didn't send. I could feel her waiting for me to stumble to say something wrong, so I gave her nothing. I smiled. I complimented the food. I asked David about work and even laughed at his tired jokes. She stared at me, confused. The more composed I became, the more she seemed to unravel. Her spoon clinked hard against her bowl. Her laugh came too sharp. Her foot tapped the floor, impatient. Then she leaned forward just a little too eagerly. Maggie, you didn't leave the front door open again, did you? I tilted my head. I wasn't aware I left it open the first time. Her eyes narrowed. Last week you said you locked it, but David found it open when he got home. David looked up. I think it was just a mistake, he added quickly, trying to smooth it over. I nodded. We all make mistakes. I've noticed the thermostat gets adjusted every now and then too, but I suppose we're all doing things we don't remember. Claire blinked. I smiled. Could be the house playing tricks on us. I saw her jaw twitch. That night, I slipped the dining room recorder back under the table, this time turned on but with a different battery and a freshly cleared SD card. If Claire wanted a collection of recordings, I'd give her one. But I wanted her voice, her admissions, her private comments when no one was around. 3 days later, I got my first real reward. I retrieved the recorder and listened. Most of it was silence furniture creaking the buzz of the refrigerator. Then came Claire's voice. David, she's definitely getting worse. She left her phone in the fridge today. I hadn't. She asked me if today was Tuesday. It's Friday. It wasn't. It was Wednesday. She was deliberately falsifying what happened. Or maybe she wanted to test if David was paying attention. Either way, she was twisting my actions and even the days to craft her story. David sighed in the background. I don't know what to do, Claire. She seems fine when I'm around. There it was. Doubt. Just a crack. But a real one. Claire lowered her voice. That's part of it. It's like she knows when to perform. Perform? I leaned back in my chair. So now I was performing sanity, no Claire. What I was performing was patience. That night, I printed out a full transcript of her conversation with David. I highlighted the parts where she lied. I placed it into an envelope and wrote, "For David," on the front. But I didn't give it to him yet, because I needed something stronger. Proof he couldn't explain away as concern. I needed him to hear her. Unfiltered. Ruthless. I knew Claire would set up another therapy session soon. She was trying to build momentum, get David on board, get a professional opinion to validate her claims. And I would walk into that room with more than suspicions. I would walk in with recordings. I would walk in with clarity. And Claire would walk out exposed. That night, I stood at my bedroom window watching the porch light flicker. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel afraid. I felt ready. Because she had tried to make me a ghost in my own home. But ghosts don't forget. And this one was about to haunt her mercilessly. The envelope came in the mail 2 days later. Thick, glossy, with a crisp folded letter inside and a business card attached. A local psychologist, Dr. Marion Keene. I recognized the name. She'd been a guest lecturer at a few educational conferences I attended before I retired. Reputable, clinical, direct. The kind Claire would trust to confirm her narrative. David placed the envelope gently on the table next to my tea. Mom, he said, Claire found someone really respected. It's just a consultation. Nothing official. Just a talk. I held the card between my fingers, studying it. I see. She's helped a lot of families navigate difficult transitions. Is that what this is? I asked, raising an eyebrow. A transition. David hesitated. It's just a precaution. There it was again. Precaution. Always wrapped in concern, always delivered like a kindness. Claire, standing in the hallway, pretended not to listen, but her head tilted ever so slightly toward us as if drawn by the gravity of her plan. Fine, I said. I'll go. But I want Claire there too. That surprised them both. David blinked. Really, I think it's important we all speak openly. Don't you agree? Claire nodded a little too quickly. Of course, that's a great idea. The appointment was for Thursday morning. I wore my navy cardigan. My husband used to call it my courtroom sweater, because I always wore it when something serious needed to be said. I brought my old leather handbag, the one with the hidden zipper where I kept the USB drive. Inside that drive were 5 recordings, all clearly dated and labeled. I also brought a copy of the transcript, just in case. Dr. Keene's office was as expected, neat, sterile, with minimalist art and gentle piano music playing under the surface of our conversation. She was in her early 50s, hair pulled into a bun, glasses perched carefully on her nose. She welcomed us in with a warmth I didn't trust yet. Claire smiled like a pageant winner, her voice calm and measured. David looked uncomfortable, caught between loyalty and doubt. I sat across from the doctor, hands folded in my lap. I understand you've been feeling watched, Maggie. Dr. Keene began gently. I've been watched. I've been recorded. There's a difference. Claire shifted slightly. Claire, I said, turning to face her, Would you like to share how many devices you've placed in my home? Her eyes widened, but she quickly composed herself. I think Maggie's been under stress and may have misinterpreted some things. I found the recorder under the dining table. Dr. Keene raised an eyebrow. You found a recorder, I did. I've brought it with me. I reached into my bag, placed the USB drive on the table. 5 recordings. All from the past 2 weeks. All capturing Claire making false statements about my mental health to David and others. Claire let out a nervous laugh. You're recording me now? No. You recorded me. I simply returned the favor. David shifted in his seat. Dr. Keene, to her credit, didn't reach for the drive right away. Maggie, can you explain what you believe is happening? I don't believe. I know. Claire has been manipulating small details in the house, moving items, adjusting clocks, altering conversations to make it appear as though I'm forgetful, confused, possibly paranoid. It's a campaign of erosion, subtle enough to seem coincidental, targeted enough to be a pattern. Claire turned to Dr. Keene. This is exactly what I was afraid of. The paranoia, the obsession. Maggie, I never placed anything anywhere to hurt you. I locked eyes with her. You took my car keys before I agreed. You removed cash from the guest room drawer. You told David I put my phone in the fridge when I didn't. I have every word saved. Shall we listen? Claire paled. David looked at her confused. You said she poured orange juice in a teacup and wandered around mumbling. You said I walked past you like you weren't even there twice. I know the day. I know the time. And none of it happened. Claire stammered. You're twisting everything. No, Claire. You did that already. Dr. Keene finally reached for the USB. I'll review this thoroughly after our session. David stood up. You recorded her? Claire looked at him desperately. I was trying to protect you. I thought she might hurt herself or us. Dr. Keene held up a hand. Let's take a breath. But the tension was no longer subtle. It had ruptured. Something broke in David's face. That mask of neutrality he had worn for weeks, it slipped. You told me she left the stove on twice. You said she forgot my name on the phone. I never said that I cut in. She said you whispered to yourself all night, he whispered. I replied. I always have. You know that. Silence. Dr. Keene gently tapped the arm of her chair. David, why don't we give your mother and Claire a moment alone? He hesitated, then nodded. When the door closed behind him, I turned to Claire. Why? Her eyes shimmered, but there were no tears. Only rage disguised as fragility. I wanted peace, she said bitterly. I wanted a home where I didn't feel watched, judged. You hover, Maggie. You loom. Always with your passive smiles and your notebooks. I thought if I could just create a little space by dismantling my mind, I didn't want it to go that far, she muttered. But you wouldn't move out. You wouldn't let go. You were everywhere. And now I asked. She looked away. Dr. Keene's voice was low but firm. Claire, what you've described and what Maggie has provided indicates psychological manipulation, potentially gaslighting. This isn't going to end here. Claire stood up, shaking. I didn't hurt her. You tried to erase me, I said. Bit by bit. And that's worse. The drive home was silent. David didn't speak. Claire sat stiffly in the back seat, as far from me as possible. When we pulled into the driveway, I stepped out, walked to the door, and unlocked it without turning around. She wouldn't be staying much longer. I didn't need to say it. The silence said it for me. The morning after the therapy session, Claire didn't come downstairs. Not to make coffee. Not to rearrange the cereal boxes like she always did. Not to hover behind me, pretending to care. Her silence was louder than her presence. David left early for work, barely making eye contact. The guilt in his eyes lingered long after his footsteps were gone. I stood alone in the kitchen, sipping my tea in complete quiet. The tension that had gripped this house for weeks, maybe months, had shifted. Like something heavy had slid off the roof in the night and crashed into the ground where everyone could see it. And now, we were walking around the wreckage. Still, I didn't let my guard down. Manipulators don't just vanish when they're exposed. They shift. They adapt. And sometimes they grow more desperate. So I started observing more closely not just Claire's actions, but her absence of action. She wasn't hovering around me anymore. She didn't offer to help or comment on my routines. She became distant, polite, eerily quiet. But I wasn't fooled. The storm hadn't passed, it was retreating, waiting for another opening. 3 days later, I found my garden gloves soaking wet left out in the rain, even though I hadn't used them. I always stored them on the hook in the garage. But there they were, slumped on the porch table, muddy and dripping like someone had thrown them there in haste. I brought them inside, placed them in the sink, and turned slowly, scanning the kitchen. Something else felt off. The vase on the table had been moved. Subtle. Just a few inches to the left. But I knew. I always arranged it with the sunflower angled toward the window. That morning, it faced the stove. I walked to the living room and glanced at the bookshelf. The photo of my wedding day was now tucked behind the one of Claire and David at the Grand Canyon. I hadn't touched it. David wouldn't. She was still playing her game. Not with full-blown accusations anymore, but with fragments. Tiny disruptions meant to fray the edges of my confidence again. I stepped out to the garden and checked the spade I always kept in the shed. It had been used. Fresh dirt clung to the handle even though I hadn't planted anything in over a week. I followed the trail inch by inch until I noticed the hydrangea bed along the fence had been subtly disturbed. Something had been buried or unburied, and the soil raked clean to look undisturbed. A chill ran through me. I grabbed a small trowel and dug gently at the base of the bush. Just a few inches below the surface, I hit plastic. A sandwich bag. Inside, folded pieces of my handwritten journal pages. Damp, torn, crumpled. Some of the entries were smeared, the ink running. They were pages from my sanity ledger, the ones I had kept hidden in my drawer weeks ago. Pages I thought were still there. Claire had taken them, then buried them. Why? To destroy the evidence. Or because she knew I'd look? I carried the bag inside, dried the contents carefully, and photographed every piece. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was gathering. Because I knew something was coming. That night, Claire broke her silence. We crossed paths in the upstairs hallway. I was heading to the bathroom when she stepped out of the guest room, startled to see me. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time she didn't smile. "Maggie," she said, voice tight. "We need to stop this." "This?" I asked calmly. "This game you're playing. With David. With therapy. With this act." I raised an eyebrow. "Which act is that?" She moved closer. "The martyr. The helpless victim. The wise, noble woman whose wicked daughter-in-law tried to ruin her." "No," I said softly. "I'm just a woman trying to survive in her own home." Claire laughed once, sharp, bitter. "You think you've won because you caught a few recordings, because you twisted a narrative in a therapist's office. You've been twisting the narrative since you moved in. I was trying to get you to step aside. Let David and I have space. But you clung to everything. Every inch of this house. Every conversation. Every quiet corner. You wanted to be needed forever." I stared at her. "You could have talked to me. Like an adult. Like family. You would have played the innocent," she snapped. "You always do. That's your power. You hide behind concern and gentle wisdom, and everyone eats it up." Her voice cracked now, the mask slipping, but I saw through it. I saw the way you watched us. Judged me. Corrected the way I cooked, folded towels, parented my own husband. I wanted my life. Not one curated by you. There it was. Finally. The truth beneath all her deception. She didn't want me to be crazy. She wanted me to disappear. And when I didn't, when I kept existing with dignity and clarity, she retaliated the only way she knew how, through shadows. "You're right about one thing," I said, stepping closer. "I do watch. I watch when someone lies. When someone tries to undo a life thread by thread. And I never forget." She clenched her jaw. "I suggest I continued. You find a new place to live. Before David sees more than he already has." Her lips trembled, but she didn't reply. She just turned and walked into her room. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what she would do next. I was ready for it. The next morning, she tried to lock me in my room. It was a quiet, gray morning. The house still slept, and the world outside was muted in fog. I woke up early as always and went to open my bedroom door. But the handle didn't turn. I tried again. Nothing. Locked. From the outside. For a moment, I stood completely still. I could hear my own breath, the hush of distant traffic, and the dull tick of the wall clock behind me. Then came the quiet creak of floorboards down the hall. Claire. I waited until I heard her descend the stairs. Only then did I sit down calmly and survey my surroundings. This wasn't an accident. My doorknob didn't even have a built-in lock. She had rigged something. Maybe a child lock. Maybe something slipped through the crack to wedge the door shut. But she wanted me contained. Out of the way. Controlled. It was so brazen, so unmistakably clear. It was her final move. She no longer needed to pretend I was imagining things. She was escalating because she was cornered. She was scared. Good. I picked up my phone and began recording a voice memo. It's 6:42 a.m. on Tuesday. I woke to find my bedroom door locked. This door doesn't lock on its own. I believe Claire has physically prevented me from leaving the room. I am safe, but this is now crossing into physical control and false imprisonment. I saved the audio file and titled it "Locked in 6:42 a.m." Then I did something I hadn't done in months. I called David. No texts, no passive notes, no waiting. When he picked up, his voice was groggy. "Mom, everything okay? I need you to come home," I said quietly. "Now." He paused. "Is something wrong?" "Yes, but it's something you need to see for yourself." David arrived 20 minutes later. I heard the door open, his steps quick and heavy. I called his phone from inside my room. "I'm locked in." "What?" "Come upstairs." He found the door exactly as I had immobile. Then I heard the soft scuffle of his fingers working at the frame, the snap of pressure, and then the door popped open with a subtle release. In his hand was a thin wooden wedge jammed between the base of the door and the frame. He looked stunned. "You see?" I said softly. He stepped back. "She locked me in. This morning. Intentionally." He didn't speak. "I documented it," I added. "I recorded the moment. Just like the others." He nodded as if his own thoughts were falling apart in his mind, like he was watching the carefully built image of his wife crumble piece by deceptive piece. "I need to talk to her," he muttered, already moving toward the stairs. "No," I said. "You need to listen first." We sat in the living room. I played the most recent audio recordings, not just the door incident, but her whispering over the phone to someone about getting closer, about almost having enough, about how I mumbled at shadows. Then I showed him the journal pages she'd buried in the garden, the photo evidence, the transcript from the session with Dr. Keene. Everything was there, stacked like bricks. Unarguable. David buried his face in his hands. He didn't speak for nearly 5 minutes. When he looked up, he seemed like someone waking from a very long, very painful sleep. "I should have seen it," he whispered. She said she was protecting me, that you were slipping. She was isolating me," I said gently now. "Not just from you. From myself. From reality. I thought you were imagining things. I know you did. I'm so sorry, Mom." I reached over, laid my hand on his. "You didn't fail me. You just trusted the wrong person." He swallowed hard. She has to go. I said nothing. Because now finally he understood. Claire wasn't home when we had that conversation. She'd gone out probably to buy more yogurt and almond milk she pretended I requested. When she returned and saw David waiting by the door, she paused. Her keys jingled in her hand. Her eyes darted to me sitting on the couch. Something inside her knew. "David?" she asked. "Claire," he replied, stepping forward. "I need you to pack your things." She blinked, laugh-breathed. What are you talking about? You locked my mother in her room this morning." "No, I know I didn't. I found the wedge. She has the recordings. She has the proof." She looked at me. Her face fell into something wild, no longer polite or polished. The performance was gone. "You set me up. I survived you," I said. "There's a difference. You twisted everything, you poisoned him against me." "No," David said. "You did that yourself." Her chest heaved. For a moment I saw the real Claire, cornered, seething, almost unhinged with fury she couldn't pour into words. Then she dropped her keys on the table and stormed upstairs. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply packed. Quietly. That evening the house was still again. Not the tense stillness of before. Not the silence she used as a weapon. This was something else. Peace. David and I sat on the back porch wrapped in sweaters, listening to the wind rustle the trees. "Where will she go?" he asked. "She'll find somewhere," I said. "People like her always do?" He nodded. "I don't know who I was living with. I think you're still figuring that out." He looked at me, eyes heavy. "I want to earn back your trust, Mom." "You don't need to earn it," I said. "Just don't ignore it again." He nodded. I reached for his hand, and this time he held on. The house breathed easier once Claire was gone. It didn't happen all at once. It wasn't like the room suddenly glowed or the air filled with laughter. It was quieter, yes, but not empty. It was steady, settled. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm. David stayed home for a few days. I could tell he needed the time, not just to absorb what had happened, but to feel it. The weight of everything he'd dismissed, the trust he'd misplaced. He cooked us dinner, something simple, pasta and garlic bread, and kept apologizing with his eyes even when his mouth stayed quiet. But I knew it wasn't over. People like Claire don't simply vanish. They don't walk away and never look back. I could still feel her fingerprints on certain things, her shadow clinging to the edges of our lives like fog. It was in the way David checked his phone more often than usual, in how he'd pause when reading texts, his jaw tightening subtly. He hadn't told anyone yet. Not his friends, not his coworkers, and definitely not her parents. I didn't blame him. Explaining something like this takes more than words. It takes courage. And guilt makes the tongue heavy. It was a Thursday when my neighbor Marlene rang the bell. She was in her 60s, too, silver-haired and fiercely observant, the kind of woman who notices which way the wind blows and how often your mailbox gets checked. I'd known her for 20 years, never one to gossip but never blind either. "I was wondering if you had a minute," she said, hands clasped politely. I invited her in, poured her some tea, and we sat at the kitchen table. She looked uneasy. I didn't want to say anything before she began, because it wasn't my business. And I thought, maybe I was imagining things. But now I think you should know. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook, flipping to a page where a date was circled in red. 3 weeks ago, she said. Around 7 p.m., I saw Claire outside near the trash bins. She was holding a white box. Looked like something from the office. I didn't think anything of it, until I saw her pull out a few papers, glance over her shoulder, and slide them into the bottom of the recycling bin. I leaned in, heart suddenly thudding. She tore up a few pages first, Marlene added, then buried the rest. I stared at her. Did you look? I didn't that night. But the next morning I checked. The papers were gone. Only the scraps were left. I pieced together a few. She handed me a small plastic envelope. Inside were torn, stained fragments of my handwriting, bits of my sanity ledger. Pages I hadn't realized were missing. She was watching your room, Marlene said quietly, pacing by the side window most nights. She'd stop when your light turned on. I thought maybe she was anxious. But now I think she was checking on you. I pressed my fingers to my lips. She wanted me to disappear, I whispered. Marlene nodded. But you didn't. I thanked her. I promised to keep it between us. But her words rang in my ears long after she left. That night I found myself unable to sleep. Not out of fear, but reflection. How long had I ignored my own instincts? How much of myself had I second-guessed Claire may have been clever? But it wasn't just her deception that almost destroyed me. It was my silence, my hesitation, my desperate hope that someone I loved couldn't possibly be trying to break me. That's how manipulation works. It wears the face of someone familiar. I stepped into the garden to clear my head, wrapped in my robe, the night air cool and still. And as I stood near the hydrangeas, the same ones she buried my journal beneath, I noticed a light flicker from across the yard. Marlene again. Her kitchen window. She raised her mug in a slow, knowing toast. I raised my hand back, a small gesture of gratitude. Because sometimes the people who save you aren't the ones who storm in with solutions. They're the ones who simply see you clearly, honestly, when everyone else is looking away. And I was beginning to see myself again, too. Bit by bit. Memory by memory. Sanity not lost, but guarded. And soon I would have to decide what to do with the woman who tried to take that from me. I didn't hear from Claire for a week. No calls, no emails, no furious texts or backpedaling apologies. Just silence. But I knew it wouldn't last. I knew Claire well enough to understand she wasn't the type to leave without leaving something behind, some final thread to pull, some twist of the knife designed to cut on the way out. That thread arrived in the form of a message sent to our family WhatsApp group. It was late Sunday morning. I had just finished watering the succulents by the kitchen window when David walked in, phone in hand, his face pale. He didn't speak. He just handed me the screen. The message was long, too long for a casual post. It began with a soft, performative tone. Hi everyone, I've taken some time away to reflect on recent events. I want to be transparent about what's been happening with Maggie. My name. Right there in the opening sentence. Claire wasn't done. She was just shifting platforms. I kept reading. We've all noticed small changes in her behavior over the past year, forgetting things, misplacing items, making the same statements over and over. Out of concern, David and I consulted a therapist, hoping to support her privately. But unfortunately, things escalated beyond our control. Beyond our control, I read on stunned as she laid out a version of reality so warped it almost sounded plausible. Maggie has been keeping secret recordings of private conversations. She believes I'm spying on her, which isn't true. She's accused me of theft, of gaslighting, and even of trying to lock her in a room. These are serious claims. I understand the need for boundaries, but I also want to be clear. I did everything I could to help. There it was. The perfect pivot. Claire painting herself as the concerned victim, the reasonable one, the martyr. She finished her message with, "Please reach out if you have questions. I just want the truth to be known, even when it's uncomfortable." Then, as if it hadn't already been orchestrated, her mother chimed in. "So sorry you're dealing with this, sweetheart. You've always been a kind soul." And her sister added, "This is so sad. I always worried something was off. Let us know if you need support." My hands trembled slightly as I passed the phone back to David. He scrolled up, rereading it, then looked at me. "I'm so sorry." "She's not sorry," I said. "She's clever. She's also lying." "Yes. But to everyone else, this reads like truth wrapped in compassion." David set the phone down. "I'll respond." "No," I said firmly. "Not yet." "Why not?" "Because if we rush in with anger, we play her game. If we try to clear the air, she'll twist it again. No, this needs a different approach. He frowned. Then what do we do? I sat at the kitchen table, took a long breath, and answered slowly. We make her comfortable enough to show her real self again. Publicly. That night, I made a plan. It started with a message of my own sent privately to Claire. Hi, Claire. I read your post. I think it's time we both sit down and talk with the rest of the family. Not through messages. Face to face. You say you want transparency. So let's have it. You choose the place. I'll be there. She responded within 10 minutes. I think that's a good idea. Thank you for being open to it. The arrogance in that sentence was almost laughable. She believed she'd rattled me into submission, that her version of the story had taken root. What she didn't know was that I had prepared something far stronger than a defense. I had truth. We met at a local cafe 3 days later. Claire had chosen it carefully, an upscale, trendy place where she could maintain appearances. She arrived in a beige coat hair styled immaculately with just enough makeup to look naturally concerned. She even ordered for me. I remember you like chamomile, she said, smiling faintly. I accepted it, said nothing. David arrived last. His energy was different, quiet, guarded. Claire noticed. I could see the performance building in her eyes. So she began. I think it's good we're here. Things got heated. Let's get to it, David said. You accused my mother of being unstable. I didn't accuse. You sent a message to the whole family suggesting she was paranoid, erratic, and forgetful. Claire exhaled. I said what I observed. I didn't make up the behaviors. I have something I want to play, I said, reaching into my bag. Claire's smile froze. I pulled out a small Bluetooth speaker, connected it to my phone, and pressed play. Her voice filled the air, recorded clearly from the night she called her sister. She's getting worse. She poured orange juice into a teacup and didn't notice. She mutters to herself all day. I'm documenting everything. Then another clip, her speaking to David after I left the room. She's starting to forget names. It's really concerning. I think if we just keep showing the therapist what's happening, we'll have enough soon. Claire's mouth opened slightly. No words came. I stopped the playback. I have more, I said, including the recording where you admit to removing pages from my journal, and the one where you told someone I forgot what day it was when I didn't. David looked at her. I defended you, he said softly. I trusted you. Claire's face changed. The warmth drained away. The mask crumpled. You're seriously going to take her side? After everything I've done for you? She's my mother, David said. And she's been telling the truth this whole time. Claire's voice rose. You don't know what it was like living with her. Everything I did, she questioned. Every routine I had, she monitored. I was suffocating. No, I said gently. You were being seen. She stood up, rattling the table. The server glanced over from behind the counter. Claire blinked as if realizing how loud she'd gotten. I'm done here, she muttered, grabbing her bag. This is a waste. Be careful what you post next, I said, because the next family message might be from me with attachments. She froze in the doorway for half a second, then left. And this time, she didn't look back. For the next 2 weeks, I played along. Not with Claire, she was gone now. Vanished into the periphery, licking her wounds somewhere behind a new screen, no doubt reshaping her version of events for the next audience. No, this time I played along with the family. Because even though Claire had left, the message she sent out into the world still lingered like smoke. Whispers from cousins, polite check-ins from out-of-town relatives, and one particularly awkward voicemail from David's aunt asking if I was feeling better. I knew what that meant. They didn't say it out loud, but I could hear the hesitation in their voices. They weren't sure who to believe, so I gave them what they expected. A little forgetfulness here. A polite pause there. I stopped correcting them when they misquoted a date or a name. I let myself seem softer, gentler, older in the way they'd imagined Claire described me. And when someone asked, "Are you keeping a journal still?" Maggie, I simply smiled and said, "Oh, I've stopped writing so much. Sometimes it's better to just live, don't you think?" And they'd nod satisfied. Because that's how people are. They don't want truth. They want consistency. And if Claire had told them I was fading, then anything that didn't contradict it too boldly, let them keep their version of events. That was fine. Let them underestimate me. Let them think I'd retired my mind along with my job title, because what they didn't know was that I was still documenting everything. Only now I kept it all digitally password protected, voice noted, and backed up to 3 cloud accounts. The ledger hadn't stopped. It had only become sharper, and I knew exactly when to use it next. One afternoon, David came into the kitchen holding his laptop. He looked hesitant. "Mom," he said, "I just got an email from Claire's lawyer." I didn't flinch. She wants to arrange a formal discussion about property. Apparently, she believes she's entitled to part of the equity in this house. My fork paused midair. She what? She says she contributed financially while living here. Groceries, utilities. Claims she made home improvements. She bought scented candles and moved the bookshelf. That's not equity. I know, he said, running a hand through his hair. It's ridiculous. But she's trying to make it formal. There it was. Claire's next phase. She couldn't ruin me emotionally. She couldn't discredit me mentally. So now she wanted to claim material value as if pain came with receipts. I reached into the cabinet and pulled out a small binder labeled Household Expenses, Claire and David Stay Year. Every receipt, every budget line, every grocery split was there. She paid for food 3 times in 6 months, I said, handing it over. I logged everything. And the utilities, I covered those? Like always. David scanned the pages and exhaled. God, you're organized. No, I said. I'm prepared. He looked at me then, not as a fragile woman or a suspicious mother or a ghost he'd once ignored. He saw me. Really saw me. You were always 3 steps ahead, weren't you? I smiled faintly. Only when someone starts playing a game I didn't agree to join. A few days later, I received a formal request from the lawyer for a written response. I composed a statement not angry, not dramatic, but factual. I attached scanned copies of receipt statements of ownership and photographs of untouched improvements. I ended it with one simple line: "This house is mine, paid in full before your client ever entered it. Her presence here was temporary, voluntary, and without contractual agreement. Any claim otherwise is unsupported by fact or evidence." Then I signed it, Margaret Ellison, not Maggie the grandmother. Not Mom, the sentimental figure. Margaret, the woman who built a life and refused to let anyone rewrite it. When the letter was sent, I waited. 1 week passed. Then 2. Finally, David walked in with his phone and showed me the screen. Claire's attorney had dropped the case. Of course she did, I said. She tried, he muttered. She always will. Not just to us, to anyone who threatens her sense of control. He looked at me tired and unsure. What do I say if she contacts me again? You don't, I said. Let silence be the language she understands. That night, I took a long bath and listened to my own voice recordings, not of Claire, but of myself. My journal entries, my late-night thoughts, my whispered observations from the hard days. There was strength in those words. I hadn't just survived her, I had rebuilt the perimeter of my mind. She thought she was dismantling me, but what she didn't know is that I come from a long line of women who never break. They bend, they watch, they wait, and then they rise. And I was rising, quietly, steadily, unapologetically. I didn't expect her to show up again, and certainly not like this. It had been almost a month of silence. No more emails, no more equity claims, no passive-aggressive texts sent to David in the middle of the night. The quiet felt real this time, not like a calm before the storm, but the kind that follows surrender. So when the doorbell rang just after sunset on a rainy Tuesday, I assumed it was the neighbor. Or maybe a package. It was neither. Claire stood under the porch light with her hair damp and clinging to her cheeks. No umbrella, no bag, just a folded coat in her arms and a strange expression on her face, half defiant, half defeated. I didn't say anything. I didn't come to cause trouble, she said. I kept my hand on the doorframe. Her voice faltered. I didn't know where else to go. Of course she didn't. Claire had burned bridges everywhere she went, but she always expected someone to pull her from the wreckage. And this time, there was only one person left who might. Me. I should have closed the door. I should have turned away and let the rain do the rest. Instead, I stepped aside and let her in. Because closure is never what you imagine. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is look the person who tried to break you squarely in the eyes. She sat at the kitchen table, dripping rainwater onto the floor, her fingers curled around the mug I handed her, like it was the only warmth she had. I'm not asking to come back, she said. I know I don't deserve that. I sat across from her, silent. I wanted to explain. I leaned back slightly. Explain that I didn't mean for it to go so far. That I didn't plan every detail the way it looked. I didn't wake up one day and decide to gaslight you. I watched her carefully. The words were shaped like regret, but her eyes, they were still calculating. I wanted space, control. I was overwhelmed. I nodded once. So you made me feel insane. I didn't think anyone would believe you, she whispered almost to herself. You were always so composed, like nothing touched you. It made me feel invisible. And so you made me invisible, I replied. To my son, to myself. She looked down. I'm sorry. I let the silence hang in the air. It had weight. Apologies don't undo cruelty. They don't restore what was taken. They're just markers, signposts that say, here, this is the wreckage I left behind. You want to feel forgiven, I said slowly. But what you really want is to feel unburdened. Claire looked up, startled. I spent months trying to hold on to my mind, I continued. I wrote in the dark. I recorded your voice while you spoke like a friend. I second-guessed myself in my own kitchen. And all the while you smiled and poured tea like you were doing me a kindness. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't flinch. You broke something in me, I said. Not because I wasn't strong, but because I had to be strong just to get through every ordinary day under your roof. She wiped at her cheek. I know. I hate myself for it. I leaned in. Don't hate yourself, I said. That's easy. You'll cry and feel something close to guilt, and then you'll move on. But remember yourself. Live with what you did. Own it. She nodded faintly. I'm going to therapy, she murmured. Real therapy. Not the kind I dragged you into. I'm trying. I sipped my tea. Good. Keep trying. We sat in silence for a moment longer. The storm outside was gentle now, no longer furious. She stood coat in hand and glanced toward the door. I won't contact David. I promise. See that you don't. She reached for the doorknob. Claire, I said, stopping her. She turned. Don't mistake my kindness tonight for an open door. This is the last. She nodded slowly. Understood. And then she was gone. David came home later that night, soaked and tired. I didn't tell him she'd come. Not because I was hiding it, but because I didn't need to prove anything anymore. That chapter was over. Instead, we sat on the couch sharing leftover soup and reruns of a comedy we used to watch when he was young, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel watched. I felt seen. The therapy session was nothing like the first. This time, I wasn't being ambushed. I wasn't being framed. I wasn't walking into a room where I was already expected to explain myself. This time, it was just me and Dr. Keene. No Claire. No sideways glances. No careful manipulation hiding behind a compassionate tone. Just truth. Mine. I wanted to come back, I told her as I sat down smoothing the edge of my skirt because I realized healing doesn't happen just because the threat is gone. It happens when you give yourself permission to understand what happened to you. She nodded, patient as always. And what happened to you, Maggie? She asked gently. I was slowly erased, I said. Not with violence, not with shouting, but with suggestion, with smiles, with carefully placed doubt. I looked down at my hands. They'd always been steady. But in those months with Claire, I'd watched them tremble more than once. Not because of age, but because of fear that I was becoming someone else. I wasn't the one who needed therapy at first, I added. But now I think I do. Dr. Keene leaned forward slightly. Why now? Because it wasn't just Claire, I said. It was the silence. The way my son looked at me. The way I started questioning things I knew I hadn't done. That gets inside you. You carry it like fog. And even now on the other side of it, I can still feel it clinging to my ribs. She nodded slowly. That's the mark of psychological abuse, Maggie. The doubt doesn't go away when the abuser leaves. It lingers until you remember who you were before. I closed my eyes. Before Claire, I was many things. A mother, a widow, a woman who knew the layout of her house by memory, who took morning walks without fear of being tracked, who could open her refrigerator without wondering if the milk had been turned to face the wrong direction on purpose. Before Claire, I had peace, and I wanted it back. Dr. Keene asked if I'd like to do something called record restoration, a process where we talked through the events not just as memories, but as truths. Documenting the actual reality moment by moment to replace the false narrative that had been forced on me. It felt a little strange at first, like narrating a story I already knew. But as we worked through it, something shifted. Each time I spoke one of those moments aloud, Claire moved the clock ahead by 20 minutes. Claire claimed I forgot her name, but I didn't. Claire said she was concerned, but I was the one documenting everything. It felt like laying bricks back into a broken foundation. I wasn't just defending myself. I was rebuilding myself. Brick by brick. Memory by memory. One morning, after a particularly cathartic session, Dr. Keene paused before I left her office. Maggie, she said, do you want to confront her again? Not in person. But in writing, some patients find it helps to say what they never got to say when they were still being silenced. I considered it. And then I wrote this. Dear Claire, you thought you could unmake me. You believed that if you turned enough knobs, twisted enough truths, and dimmed enough lights, I would fade into the background. You thought age made me pliable. That grief made me soft. But what you didn't understand is that I have endured far worse storms than you. You played a long game of slow erasure, and for a while, it worked. You made me doubt myself. You made me question the reliability of my own senses. You took the rituals of my daily life and warped them into exhibits for your case against me. But I'm not the fragile woman you imagined. I am the mother who taught her son to walk again after a childhood surgery. I am the widow who learned to sleep in a bed that felt too big. I am the counselor who helped hundreds of teenagers believe in themselves when no one else did. I do not disappear. I document. I observe. I endure. You tried to corner me with kindness and call it care. You smiled while stealing pieces of my reality. But I caught every move. And now I remember all of it clearly, permanently. You may walk away from this with your own version of events, but I walk away intact. And that is something you will never have again. Credibility. Goodbye. Margaret Ellison. I printed it, folded it, and placed it in my drawer. I never mailed it. Because some truths don't need to be shouted. They just need to be written, acknowledged, owned. It was a quiet Sunday morning when David knocked on my bedroom door. He never did that before. Not like this. Not tentative. Not like a man asking permission to enter his mother's world again. "Come in," I said already, knowing something had shifted. He stepped inside, holding his phone loosely at his side. "She called me," he said. I didn't need to ask who. "She wants to meet," he added. "Said she has something to return." I didn't answer right away. I watched his face, the hesitation there, the trace of loyalty that still lingered beneath the disappointment. Love doesn't vanish just because it was misplaced. I knew that better than anyone. "Do you want to go?" I asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "Part of me wants closure. Part of me thinks maybe it'll undo something in me." I stood and walked to the window. The hydrangeas had bloomed early this year, pale blue leaning gently against the fence. "I can come with you," I offered, surprising even myself. Not to interfere. Just to be there. He looked at me, startled. "You would?" "Yes," I said. "Because I think it's time you see her with your eyes fully open." We met at a quiet bench near the park. The same park where David had learned to ride his bike, where his father used to bring us picnics. It was the kind of place that still held echoes of who we used to be. Claire was already seated when we arrived. She didn't stand, just nodded and gestured to the space beside her. David sat. I remained a few paces behind, letting them talk. Watching. She pulled a small velvet pouch from her bag and handed it to him. "My grandmother's earrings," she said. "I never gave them to you after the wedding like I promised." I thought, maybe it's right to return them now. David opened the pouch, looked inside, then closed it gently. "Thank you." They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Claire leaned forward. "I'm sorry," she said. "I mean it. I know I've said it before. But I don't just mean for what I did to your mother. I'm sorry for what I did to you." He looked at her, his eyes cautious. "You used me," he said quietly. "I did," she admitted. "Because I couldn't bear being small in a house that wasn't mine. Because I didn't know how to compete with her. So I didn't. I tried to remove her instead." David swallowed. "Why didn't you just leave?" "Because I loved you," she said. "And because I thought I could win." Her voice cracked on that word, win. It wasn't love that fueled her actions. It was rivalry, insecurity, power. And now, it was loss. David nodded once. "You lost us both." Claire blinked fast, but no tears fell. Not this time. She stood, nodded at me, a gesture, nothing more, and walked away. And with that, the last remaining thread between us frayed and fell. Later that night, David and I sat in the living room. He played the last of the recordings I'd given him, the one I hadn't intended to share until now. In it, Claire's voice was calm, even tender. "I just want her to question herself. That's all. If she hesitates long enough, David will see it too. It'll be easier for everyone if she just steps down." You know, it was from early in her campaign, before she realized I was recording. Before she knew I had already started piecing it together. David listened in silence. Then he hit stop. He didn't speak for a long while. "You don't have to carry her anymore," I said gently. He looked at me, tears forming behind his tired eyes. "I carry guilt," he whispered. "I know. I let her do it. I helped her even." "You didn't help her. You believed her. There's a difference." He nodded. "I want to believe in you again." I took his hand. "Then start by believing in yourself again." The next morning, I opened the windows early. The sun hit the kitchen tiles just right, the way it used to before everything was clouded with suspicion. I brewed my tea. No performance, no pretense, just peace. The house was still mine. The walls didn't whisper anymore. The floorboards creaked with memory, not warning. And the air held something new. Not vengeance, not victory. Just clarity. Because now the truth wasn't locked inside me, buried under gaslight and doubt. It had been recorded, replayed, and finally believed. I always believed the scariest thing about losing your mind was knowing it might be happening and not being able to stop it. But I was wrong. The real horror is being fully aware of yourself, your memories, your patterns, your voice, and watching as someone else tries to convince the world that none of it is real, that you aren't real. That was what Claire did, not with fists, not with shouting, but with whispers, with disappearing keys, twisted words, lights turned off when I knew I'd left them on. She didn't just want to erase me from my son's eyes, she wanted to erase me from my own. But she failed. Not because I was invincible, not because I never doubted myself, but because I kept holding on to my instincts, to the facts, to the slivers of reality she hadn't yet corrupted. I wrote them down. I recorded them. I tracked the truth even when it felt small. And in doing so, I built a ladder out of her lies, one I climbed step by painful step until I could breathe again. It's been several months now. Claire has disappeared from our lives completely. Her social media's gone, her friends don't ask, her family doesn't reach out. The silence she once used as a weapon has become her own form of exile. David moved back into the guest room for a while, said he needed time to reset, to be near the one person who never lied to him, even when he didn't want to hear the truth. I let him. Not because I needed him close, but because I wanted him to understand how healing feels, not loud, not dramatic, but quiet, like an old house settling after the last storm. He started helping me replant the garden. The soil was hard after winter, but we worked it with our hands. No gloves, no hurry. We planted lavender like the kind Claire used to make tea with. But this time, we planted it for ourselves, not as a sedative, as a reminder. One night, as we sat on the porch, David asked, "Do you think she ever really loved me?" I didn't answer right away. "I think she loved the version of you she could control," I said finally. "But real love doesn't need to win. It doesn't need to erase." He nodded slowly, and I could tell he was healing too. I no longer check over my shoulder when I enter a room. I no longer second-guess whether I left the light on or the teacup in the sink. The walls feel honest again. The mirrors show only me, not a woman unraveling, but a woman restored. Not younger, not untouched, but whole and wiser. Because now I understand that the people who try to convince you you're broken are often the ones who fear your strength the most. Claire didn't hate me because I was weak. She feared me because I saw her, because I watched her, and because I didn't break. So if you're listening to this and you've ever felt like you were slipping out of your own mind, if someone has whispered just enough to make you hesitate before speaking, before acting, before trusting yourself, write it down, record it, remember it. You are not crazy. You are being cornered, and you are not alone. Because some of us made it through. Some of us clawed our way back to the surface, journal in one hand, voice recorder in the other, dignity still intact. Some of us, like me, stood our ground until the truth had no choice but to be seen. And now I sleep with the windows open. I sing while I clean. And when I pour my tea, I don't wonder if it's laced with something subtle. I just drink and smile. Because I am still here. Because I never left. Because this, my mind, my peace, my life is mine. And no one gets to take that from me again. If you've ever been gaslit or made to question your own reality, know this: you are not the problem. And you are not alone. Subscribe to Grace's Truth for more real stories of quiet strength and resilience. And if you have a story like this, drop it in the comments below. You never know who might need it.